This is English shorthand dictation number 80 and the dictation speed is 120 words per minute. Ready? Start. Sir, I consider it a proud privilege to speak in support of this historic resolution so ably moved by Pandit Nehru. I do not wish to refer to the issue raised by the earlier speakers or speak on the speeches made 6,000 miles away by people who either mean mischief or are totally ignorant of the real situation. I wish to offer a few remarks on that of this resolution, the fundamental rights which affect a section of the people, namely women. It will warm the heart of many a woman to know that free India will mean not only equality of status but equality of opportunity. It is true that a few women in the past and even today enjoy high status and have achieved the highest honor that any man can receive, like our friend Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. But these women are few and far between. One swallow does not make a summer. These women do not give us a real picture of the position of Indian women in this country. The average woman in this country has suffered now for centuries from inequalities heaped upon her by laws, customs and practices of people who have fallen from the heights of that civilization of which we are all so proud and in praise of which Dr. Radhakrishnan has always spoken. There are thousands of women today who are denied the ordinary human rights. They are put behind the parda, secluded within the four walls of their homes, unable to move freely. The Indian woman has been reduced to such a state of helplessness that she has become an easy prey of those who wish to exploit the situation. In degrading women, man has degraded himself. In raising her, man will not only raise himself but raise the whole nation. Mahatma Gandhi's name has been invoked on the floor of this house. It would be ingratitude on my part if I do not acknowledge the great debt of gratitude that Indian women owe to Mahatma Gandhi for all that he has done for them. In spite of all these, we have never asked for privileges. The women's organization to which I have the honor to belong has never asked for reserved seats, for quotas, or for separate electorates. What we have asked for is social justice, economic justice, and political justice. We have asked for that equality which can alone be the basis of mutual respect and understanding, and without which real cooperation is not possible between man and woman. Women form one half of the population of this country and therefore men cannot go very far without the cooperation of women. This ancient land cannot attain its rightful place, its honored place in this world without the cooperation of women. I therefore welcome this resolution for the great promise which it holds, and I hope that the objectives embodied in the resolution will not remain on paper but will be translated into reality. Mr. Chairman, sir, Dr. Ambedkar did not say anything last time about the depressed classes, so I consider it a great honor to speak to the members of the Constituent Assembly on behalf of the scheduled castes of India. I stand here to support the resolution moved by Pandit Nehru. After analyzing the whole of the resolution and examining it in detail, I find that it is the best document that has ever extended hopes to the minds of the people of India for freedom. Some of my friends who have spoken before have pointed out some defects in it. Nevertheless, the resolution as it stands before us will serve to solve many of the problems that have got to be solved before drawing up a constitution. I do feel there are many obstacles in our way, but we know we shall have to surmount them. If we look back into the history of the democratic nations of the world, we would see that every constitution making body had to face many difficulties, but still they were successful at the end. It is a pity that our Muslim League friends have kept themselves out and are not taking part in the deliberations of this assembly. But when we know that Hindus and Muslims will have to live in this country of ours, we shall have to solve our differences amicably by some way or other. It is hoped that the Muslim League members will, sooner or later, take up their rightful places in this assembly, join in the deliberations, and help in framing a constitution that will be acceptable to all. In this august house of the Constituent Assembly, we belonging to the depressed classes are very few in number. But in the country as a whole, our population is 60 million. We are no doubt a part and parcel of the great Hindu community. But our social status in the country is so very low that we do feel that we require adequate safeguards to be provided for us. Firstly, we should be considered as a minority, not in the sense in which a community is a minority on religious or racial grounds, but a minority which is a separate political entity. However, it is needless to point out that we are a separate political entity. I think those who have got themselves interested in the upliftment of the depressed classes will admit, as Mahatma Gandhi himself has admitted by his words and deeds, that adequate safeguards are necessary for these classes for their political salvation. The Pune Pact is Mahatma Gandhi's creation, and his writings in the Harijan amply prove that the interests of the depressed classes must be carefully looked after. The Cabinet Mission's statement of May 16 does not say anything about the depressed classes, but the press conference that the British Cabinet Ministers had after the publication of the statement in Delhi clearly shows that the depressed classes should be regarded as a minority. The subsequent debates on India in the House of Commons as well as in the House of Lords have also laid